Have you guys ever wondered what is the difference, if any, between understanding something complex and being able to master it? Understanding something complex means that you are capable of performing that complex activity. Mastering it means that you can simplify it and explain it to others so that even they can understand it. So I think it's a big crime for people that are conservative not to promote individuals like Thomas Sowell more. Because the man is able to take very complex things and simplify them in a way that anyone can understand. For example, the way he defines social justice is top-down imposition of the notion of third parties who pay no price for being wrong. And Thomas Sowell dedicated a lot of his work in order to criticize intellectuals, especially in his book, Society and Intellectuals. And he considers that in the world there are intelligent people and that you have intellectuals. An intelligent person is a chess grandmaster, an engineer, a doctor. And it separates them from intellectuals in the fact that they pay responsibility when they are wrong. For example, if an engineer wants to design a bridge and he's got this very elaborate way of doing it, if the bridge collapses and if there's damages, he's got to pay for it, regardless of how it looked like on the paper and how elaborate his plan was, how grandiose and how amazing it sounded. If the bridge collapses, he has to pay for it. It's the same with a doctor. If he botches a surgery, that's malpractice. He has to pay for it. And then you have the intellectuals, people that come up with ideas and plans that influence the lives of millions of people. And regardless if it turns out that these ideas are catastrophic and they cause a lot of objectionable harm, they never get to be held accountable for these things. Take a look at this job position, for example. Assistant Director of Fairness and Belonging, West Midlands Police, Birmingham. The job salary, £74,000 a year. So my question is, how do you quantify as fairness and belonging? How can you point out that, all right, this guy is doing a good job? Like, since we hired him, there has been more fairness and belonging in the community than his predecessor. Or what if he's got certain ideas that sound good on paper, but when put into practice, they cause people to feel more unfairness and they feel like they don't belong? You see what I'm getting at? Like, there is absolutely no way to quantify these intellectuals or hold them accountable if they actually cause harm. So let's take a look at the Greta-Thunberg phenomenon. There are certain intelligent people out there, people far more wise than I am, who came to the conclusion that the planet is dying. And the only way to save the planet is through big government. So pay more taxes, basically. More money, more governmental power, and this will fix everything. And I noticed that a lot of smart people, more intelligent than I am, always have big government as a solution for literally every problem, imaginable or real, that have existed or will exist. Racism, what is the solution? More government. Climate change, what is the solution? More government. COVID, what is the solution? More government. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Now, the question is, what does government run on? Like, an organism runs on food, water, and air. What does the government run on? Well, it runs on taxpayer money. That's what it runs on. So the bigger it is, the more taxes it requires from the people. And Thomas Sowell points out, well, the idea is that you take a lot of taxes and then you redistribute it to the people. And then why is it that in California now, one of the most wealthy states in America, ran by people far more intelligent than I will ever be, has the biggest wealth disparity in the country? And it has a huge homeless problem. And it's also run by left-leaning people. So where is the redistribution? The taxes are going in, but they don't seem to be going out for everyone. So this is like a problem that needs to be addressed. But again, the intellectuals, they do not answer for these issues. If a doctor was to give a treatment to a person and he's having numerous side effects, like even small side effects, let's say he's getting a rash and it's very uncomfortable for him, the doctor has to answer for that. But these intellectuals, they never have to answer for any of the decisions that they're making. So when you look at the whole idea with the problem that the world is ending, Mother Gaia is suffering, What is the solution? Well, more taxes, carbon tax, tax this, tax that, tax. And then you look at Paris, which is a city that has been burning for a couple of months, if not years, due to the Yellow Vest protest. What caused the Yellow Vest protest? The tax on fuel, extra taxes on fuel. And they eventually, it's like, well, we can't pay for this anymore. Our life is too hard. And they went into the streets and they did a lot of property damage and whatnot. Who has to pay for that? The taxpayer has to pay for that. None of the politicians were ever held to account for their decisions. You're not going to see the activists being held account for their decisions. And another thing that I noticed is that the person that actually has to pay, the taxpayer, is being completely cut off from the conversation. So if I were to say something like, okay, well, the problem is Mother Gaia is dying, okay? Why can't we have nuclear power then? It's a good question, isn't it? It's like, why can't we fund more research into fusion? Now, fusion, as I understand it, isn't possible today, but maybe it will be possible in a decade. So why can't we just invest more money so that we can have more clean technology in the future? Why is it that the West constantly gets criticized for their carbon emissions, but we hear almost no criticism going towards China? What is that? And by the way, do we even trust an authoritarian nation to release the accurate numbers and not cook the books? Because when you control the press in a country, when you control the activists, when you control journalists, you can say whatever you want. Who's going to challenge that? And we're supposed to pretend that we do not notice when in the West the taxes are rising and you have things proposed like carbon tax and all sorts of filters that companies need to install in order to be clean and make sure they're not polluting. But we're not supposed to notice that a lot of these companies are now outsourcing to China. So they build stuff there where they're not under the pressure to not pollute, and then they sell the stuff here. And we're supposed to consider, oh, you know what? That's carbon friendly. That is like, wow, such an accomplishment. As if the world pollution isn't global. Like if you're polluting in China and you're not polluting here, overall it's not the same shit. This is what I don't understand. And again, like this type of conversation will never make it to the mainstream because the mainstream is dominated by the Greta Thunberg phenomenon. So people who lived under the Iron Curtain or in socialist nations are hyper aware of the Greta Thunberg phenomenon because we had it here. In the USSR, and I will probably make a video after this, they constantly had the child hero mythos. So the child hero mythos was the idea that children are going to be much more enlightened and much more progressive than their parents. And often we should listen to children for insight because they know better than the elderly generation, which are more conservative, reactionary, and stuck in the old ways. One example was a child that was promoted to the status of hero in the USSR for ratting on his parents, which were anti-revolutionaries, and their parents were arrested, and he managed to become like this glorious symbol for the Soviet Union. I'll probably make a video about it. It's interesting. It's not exactly like that, but that's the gist of it. And it's the same with Greta. So what is the Greta Thunberg phenomenon? Well, apparently, as I understand it, she was a child, but a couple of days ago, she became 18. I guess she skipped the teenage part altogether. Like, she didn't have a teenage, a teenage period. She just became from child, she transitioned from child to woman. Perfect. Okay. And now she's posting this on her Twitter page. This very snarky comment. She's got like the Flat March Society in order to compare her critics with conspiracy theorists. Like, she has the truth. And if you don't believe her, if you do not accept it, then you're like a type of person that believes in flat earth. And you should be censored. Because in a good, decent, healthy democracy where people have freedom, they do not have the freedom to believe in conspiracies. Like, conspiracies are harmful and they need to be banned wherever you see it. If you see a person that believes in Loch Ness or in Bigfoot, he's a danger to society. He needs to be taken care of by multi-billionaires that run social media. And then she talks about how she's going to go to the local pub and she's going to expose the dark secrets behind the climate and school strike conspiracy and her evil handlers who no longer control her. Okay, so we are told to believe that if you're not a conspiracy theorist, you need to believe that one day a girl from Sweden with no connections whatsoever, just like a random girl, looked around to the sky one day and said, damn it, there's just too much carbon in the atmosphere. We're all going to die if I don't do something. And she decided by herself to go and protest in front of the parliament in Sweden. Her parents were okay with it, because most parents are okay when kids just go, you know what, I'm taking a strike from school. I'm not going to school. And parents were like, you go, girl. So she goes there. It just so happens by coincidence that some person with influence finds her. And then again, like this lady doesn't have any connections or anything, but she manages to speak in front of the UN. She manages to speak with world leaders. She manages to speak with all sorts of politicians. She manages to speak with famous actors. And we're to believe that this is completely organic, that there are no people that are helping her out. Oh, and by the way, like, she never actually had an interview with someone that disagrees with her, because she's a child, of course. Like, how could you put a child to defend their arguments? I mean, I remember even in high school myself, when I would write a paper, I still had to sometimes defend it in front of the class. Like, our teacher would encourage that. It's like, write an essay on blah, blah, blah. And then you would go in front of the classroom, you would read your essay, and other students would ask questions. Sometimes they would actually try to trip you and, make fun of what you wrote. But none of that is here because, well, how can you expect a child to defend what they're saying? Like, for example, I would ask, it's like, why are you not going to China? Or I'd love to see how she completely demolishes someone that doesn't believe in climate change. I would like to see her just, like those videos that atheist demolishes Christian. I would love to see any of that. We're not going to. Why not? Because people that are not on board with the program do not get to participate in the conversation. That's why. And this is why a lot of people are infuriated by this. Like, people don't like it when they're silenced. You don't change people's mind by silencing them and making sure that they don't get to speak. That's not how it works. And if you look at the USSR when they actually did do this, you end up with Lysenkoism, which was a brilliant man, much smarter than I am, an intellectual, which believed that genetics is a Nazi concept. Like, only they used to have this in their ideology. Like, genetics and evolution doesn't exist. And instead he suggested that plants can operate in the same way as socialism does. So if you plant like different plants in the same soil, they will help each other out so that all of the plants do well. And he also took away the concept of fertilizer. Now, anyone that disagreed with this was silenced. Either fired from the university or in extreme cases taken to the gulags. His policies caused a massive famine in the USSR. And do you know who was held responsible? Well, not him, obviously, because he had the backing of the Communist Party and the Communist Party was never wrong. The peasants were held responsible because they didn't implement Lysenkoism properly. So that's an issue that we can learn from human history. But again, it doesn't seem that human history is going to go this way. There are so many things that I could complain about this. For example, the idea that you should buy an electric car. Okay, like, you need to buy an electric car because those doesn't pollute. And on the surface, it seems like it works. I mean, it does seem normal. You look at a car that runs on diesel and there's smoke coming out of its ass. Okay, but when you look at an electric car, there's no smoke coming on its ass. So clearly, the correct choice is the electric car. But then you realize that a lot of nations, especially in Europe, they manufacture this electricity from somewhere. Now, I know most people believe that electricity is that stuff that goes in the walls and then you put it in the socket and something functions. It's like magic for a lot of people. But in reality, the electricity gets to be produced someplace. Now, in some places it could be hydropower, but in most places it's powered by coal. Which is why it seems that the people who are mining Bitcoin right now are polluting massively. And how do they mine Bitcoin? They use electricity. So when there's more need for electricity, when there's more of a demand, then there's more coals to be burned. So if tomorrow everyone would buy an electric car, that wouldn't mean that the pollution is lowering because now there's need for more electricity, so they need to pump more coal into that. If you actually wanted for things to be green friendly, you would need a nuclear power plant. Do you know who are the geniuses that made nuclear power unpalatable and they fear-mongered incredibly due to this? The Green Party in Germany. After Chernobyl had the meltdown, the Green Party in Germany and other green activists led the charge against nuclear power.